The galactic survey vessel Odyssey was a silent, gray needle against the endless black of space. Below it, planet Silva turned, a perfect, brilliant green marble. From up here, it looked peaceful. But the people on the Odyssey knew the truth. Inside the ship, Commander Sumin stood at a large window, looking down at the planet. Her face was hard, showing no emotion. She was a tall woman with short, black hair and a strong posture. In her mind, she saw the lists of names. The first expedition, 100 of the best explorers, scientists, and soldiers from the Galactic Alliance. They had gone down to Silva full of hope. Only 10 had come back, and they were broken. Their bodies were injured, but their minds were shattered. They talked about a jungle that moved, that hunted, that thought. They called it the Green Death. Now it was her turn. Her team was much smaller. Just 4 people. Their mission was simple. Go down, find out what happened, and survive long enough to send back useful data. It was considered a high-risk, probably suicidal mission. The door to the observation deck slid open with a quiet hiss. Hannah, the team's geologist and tech expert, walked in. She was younger than Sumin, with a curious energy that she tried to hide under a professional calm. The final checks are done, Commander, Hannah said, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. The pod is ready. Day is running the last diagnostics on the landing systems. Sumin nodded, not turning away from the view. And Jean? Is he ready? Hannah shifted her weight. He is already on the surface, Commander. This made Sumin turn, her sharp eyes fixed on Hannah. He what? His drop wasn't scheduled for another 6 hours. I know, Hannah said, holding up her hands. He was insistent. He said a standard landing with all of us would create too much acoustic disturbance. He said he needed to go down early, alone and quiet to set up his preliminary sensors and introduce himself to the local biosphere. Sumin let out a short, frustrated breath. Jean was their xenobiologist, the expert on alien life. He was brilliant, but he marched to the beat of his own drum. She had argued against this, but the mission commanders had given him special permission. They were desperate for any new approach after the first failure. Fine, Sumin said, the word tight. Then we stick to the schedule. Let's go. The journey to the drop pod was quiet. Day, their pilot and engineer, was already inside, his fingers flying over the control panels. He was a quiet man, more comfortable with machines than people. He gave Sumin a quick nod as she and Hannah strapped themselves into their seats. Landing sequence is initiated, Day said, his voice calm and focused, targeting the primary landing zone, the same one the first team used. The pod shuddered as it detached from the Odyssey. Then came the violent, shaking ride down through the atmosphere. The windows glowed orange with the heat of re-entry. Sumin closed her eyes, mentally reviewing the tactical data from the first mission. Ambushes, poisonous plants, predators that could change color, a whole world that seemed to be their enemy. The shaking stopped. A series of loud booms echoed as the braking rockets fired, slowing their fall. With a final, heavy thump, the pod landed. The sudden silence was the loudest thing Sumin had ever heard. Day unstrapped himself. Touchdown. Atmosphere and pressure are stable. It's safe to disembark. Sumin took a deep breath, unclipped her pulse rifle from its rack, and stood up. Stay sharp. Hannah scanned for life signs. Day, you have point. The pod's door slid open, and a wave of thick, wet air washed over them. It was heavy with smells. Sweet, rotting flowers, damp earth, and something sharp and metallic they couldn't identify. The light was a dim, greenish glow, filtered through a dense canopy high above. They were in a clearing, a rough circle of hard-packed gray soil. All around them, the jungle was a wall of incredible, terrifying life. Trees with purple bark and leaves like sharpened knives twisted towards the sky. Vines, thick as a person's leg, hung down, covered in glistening thorns. The sounds were a constant, layered symphony of clicks, hums, deep rattles, and high-pitched chitters. It was beautiful and it was horrifying. And there, in the middle of the clearing, was Jean. He was kneeling on the ground, his back to them. He wore simple, sturdy clothes, not heavy armor. His helmet was off, lying beside him. His sample case was open, and he was carefully placing a small, glowing mushroom into a transparent container. Sumin's grip tightened on her rifle. "Jean, what is the meaning of this? You are out of protocol. Your helmet is off." Jean turned slowly. He was a man with a calm, thoughtful face. He didn't look scared or stressed. He looked like a man studying an interesting bug in his own backyard. "Commander," he said, his voice quiet and even. "The air is breathable. The helmet's filters scrub out useful chemical signals. How can I listen if I'm deaf?" "Listen to what?" Sumin snapped, her eyes scanning the tree line for any movement. "To everything," Jean said, standing up and closing his case. "The perimeter is secure for now, but we should not stay here long. This clearing, it is an open wound. The jungle does not like it." Hannah was looking at her scanner, her brow furrowed. "He's right, Commander. Life signs are everywhere, but they're hard to read. It's all blended together, like the whole forest is one big, fuzzy signature. It's nothing like the clear readings we get on other worlds." Day pointed towards the edge of the clearing. "Look, wreckage." They all turned. Partially swallowed by creeping blue vines was the mangled shell of another drop pod. The symbol of the first expedition was still visible, scratched and faded. It was a grim reminder of why they were here. The first team had landed here in this exact spot. They had cleared the area with laser cutters and sonic blasters. They had set up a fortified base. And they had died here. Jean walked over to the wreckage, not with sadness, but with a scientist's curiosity. He pointed to the vines covering it. "See how they have grown? They are not just climbing on it. They are pulling it apart, digesting it. The jungle is reclaiming this place, erasing the damage." "So what are you suggesting?" Sumin asked, her voice tight. "That we just stand here and let it reclaim us, too?" "No," Jean said, turning to face her. His calmness was a stark contrast to her tension. "I am suggesting we learn the rules." The first team broke them. They saw a wall, so they tried to break it down. They did not realize the wall could fight back. He gestured towards a path, a slightly less dense area between two massive trees. "We should move. Follow the natural paths. Do not make new ones. And do not, unless your life depends on it, kill anything." Sumin looked at her team. Hannah looked fascinated. Day looked cautious. She felt the heavy weight of command. Every instinct as a soldier told her to fortify, to secure a position, to dominate the environment. But Jin's way, the way of the first expedition, had led to disaster. "Fine," she said, making a decision she wasn't sure about. "We do it your way, for now. But the moment I sense a threat to my team, we do it my way." "Understood." Jean gave a small nod. "Understood, Commander." He shouldered his pack, which was full of sample containers and scientific instruments, not weapons. He led the way, not with the cautious, sweeping movements of a soldier, but with the slow, observant steps of a hiker. Sumin followed, her rifle held ready. Hannah came next, her scanner constantly humming. Day took the rear, his eyes watching the shadows behind them. They left the clearing and the dead pod behind. The jungle closed around them instantly, the light growing dimmer. The sounds grew louder. It felt like the trees themselves were watching them. The air was so thick it was hard to breathe. They had taken their first steps into the green maze. The graveyard of ambition was behind them. The unknown, and whatever had killed 90% of the explorers who came before them, was all around. The only thing guiding them was the quiet, unarmed man walking in front, who believed the secret to survival was not in fighting the jungle, but in learning to listen to it. The jungle pressed in on them from all sides. The air was a wet, warm blanket, heavy with smells they were still learning. Sweet rot, damp soil, and the sharp tang of something unknown. Sounds came from everywhere. High clicks, low hums, and the rustle of things moving just out of sight. Commander Sumin led the way, her pulse rifle held tight against her shoulder. Her eyes never stopped moving, scanning the tangled vines and strange, twisting trees. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Behind her, Hannah kept one eye on her life-form scanner and the other on the confusing path. The scanner's screen was a mess of overlapping signals. Nothing was clear. Day walked at the back, his own rifle ready, constantly checking behind them. He trusted his machines, but here the jungle made him feel blind. And then there was Jean. He walked not like a soldier in hostile territory, but like a man on a quiet walk in a park. His own rifle was slung on his back and used. In his hands he held a datapad and a small collection kit. He would stop every few steps, not to look for danger, but to look at the life around them. He noted a fungus that glowed a soft blue. He recorded the call of a flying creature with 6 wings. This slow pace was making Sumin tense. "We need to maintain a steady advance, Jean. We are not on a sightseeing tour." Jean looked up from a large, beautiful flower he was examining. It had petals of deep purple and a center that pulsed with a soft, inviting blue light. "Understanding is our best defense, Commander," he said, his voice calm. "Every minute we spend learning is a minute we are not making a fatal mistake." Just then, Hannah's scanner let out a sharp beep. Movement, 12 meters ahead, in the canopy. Fast. Sumin immediately dropped into a crouch, raising her rifle. Positions. Day, watch our rear. Day and Hannah formed a tight triangle with her, weapons pointing outwards. Jean, however, stayed where he was, looking up. Something moved in the high branches. It was sleek and covered in scales that shifted from green to brown, blending perfectly with the leaves. It had 6 legs ending in sharp claws and a long, thin head full of needle-like teeth. It moved with a fluid, terrifying grace, circling them. "It's stalking us?" Sumin whispered, her finger resting on the trigger. "It's assessing us for weakness." The creature dropped to a lower branch, closer now. It let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated in their bones. It was a predator. It saw them as prey. "I have a clear shot," Sumin said, her voice tight. "Wait," Jean said, his tone not a plea, but a firm suggestion that Sumin ignored him. The creature coiled its muscles, ready to pounce. This was it. This was the moment the first team had described, the sudden, violent attack from the shadows. But Jean did something unbelievable. He took a slow step forward, putting himself between the team and the predator. He made no sudden moves. He did not raise his hands in a threat. Instead, he made a series of soft, clicking sounds with his tongue against the roof of his mouth. Click-clack, click, click-clack. The creature froze. Its head, which had been low and aggressive, tilted. The growling stopped. Jean made the sound again, slower this time. Then he made a low, huffing noise, like a sigh. The creature stared at him, its intelligent eyes blinking. After a long, tense moment, it let out a similar huff. Then, it simply turned, scrambled up the tree trunk, and vanished into the green gloom. The jungle sounds, which had seemed to grow quiet, slowly returned. Sumin slowly lowered her rifle, her heart pounding. She stared at Jean. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything aggressive," Jean explained, turning back to them. He typed a note into his datapad. The first team's data mentioned creatures like that. They always fired. They always fought. I just tried a different approach. "What was that sound?" Hannah asked, her voice full of wonder. "I've been listening," Jean said. "I heard smaller prey animals make that click pattern when they were calm and feeding. The huff is a sound I heard from a larger herbivore, a sign it was not a threat. I just repeated them. I told it I was not food, and I was not a hunter. It understood." "That's incredible," Day said, his usual caution replaced by amazement. "It's logic," Jean replied. "This ecosystem is a conversation." The first team only shouted, "I am trying to speak its language." He turned and pointed back at the beautiful, pulsing flower Sumin had almost stepped on. "And we almost shouted again." He gestured to the ground around the flower. "Look here." They all looked. The soil around the flower was blackened and scorched. "The first team used flammers here," Jean said. "They saw a strange plant and burned it. A standard procedure on a dead world. But this world is alive. He pointed to a vibrant, blood-red moss that was growing thickly over the scorched earth. It seemed to pulse slowly, like a beating heart. This fire moss was not in the initial reports from the first expedition, Jean explained. It is a response. The jungle fights fire with this. I took a small sample earlier. Its spores release a chemical that makes other plants incredibly flammable. You try to burn one threat, and you create a firestorm. Aggression is met with overwhelming escalation. Sumin looked from the scorch marks to the red moss, then to the tree where the predator had been. A cold realization was settling in her stomach. Her training, all her experience, was based on a simple idea: identify the threat and eliminate it. But here, eliminating one threat seemed to create a worse one. Shooting the predator might have called something bigger. Burning the flower had created a more dangerous plant. Jean was not being soft. He was being smart. He was learning the rules of this place, and the first rule was, do not start a fight you cannot finish. And in this jungle, they could never finish the fight. Okay, Sumin said, her voice quieter than before. She looked at Jean. What are the rules? Jean gave a small, appreciative nod. He understood the significance of her question. Rule 1. Do not be the first to act with violence. Observe first. Always. Rule 2. Move with the jungle, not against it. Follow the paths that are already here. Rule 3. Pay attention to the other animals. If they are calm, we can be calm. If they flee, we should be ready. Rule 4. Do not damage the plants without extreme cause. They are all connected. He looked at each of them. This is not a war. This is a negotiation. We are guests in a house that has already killed many rude visitors. We must be polite. The rest of that day's march was different. Sumin still held her rifle, but her posture was less rigid. She watched Jean more than she watched the jungle. She saw how he would sometimes hum a low note when passing a certain tree, and how the rustling in its branches would stop. She saw how he avoided touching the vines with the shiny thorns, instead taking a longer route around. He was reading the jungle like a book, and they were only now learning the alphabet, so they set up a makeshift camp for the night in a small, rocky hollow. Hannah was helping Jean catalog the day's findings. Glow orchid appears to mark a neutral zone. Responds to calm, low-frequency sound. Cloak stalker, the predator, potentially neutral if not threatened. Sumin sat on a rock, cleaning her rifle, her mind racing. She had been prepared for monsters. She was not prepared for a world that required etiquette. She looked over at Jean, who was gently offering a drop of water from his canteen to a small, eight-eyed furry creature that had crept close to investigate. The creature sniffed his finger, then licked the water, its long tail twitching happily. Jean didn't try to pet it or grab it. He just sat there, letting it be. After a moment, it scurried away. Will it come back? Sumin found herself asking. Maybe, Jean said. If it thinks we are a source of water or salt, and not a source of danger, it might. It might even warn others about us. Or warn us about others. A lookout. He was recruiting the locals. As darkness fell completely, the jungle changed. New sounds emerged. Deeper roars and haunting, melodic calls. The bioluminescence came out, painting the forest in shades of blue and green and gold. It was terrifyingly beautiful. Sumin took the first watch. She sat at the edge of their hollow, looking out into the glowing, singing, clicking night. For the first time since landing, she didn't just see a threat. She saw a system, a complex, living, and very dangerous system. Jean was right. You couldn't fight a system. You had to learn how to live within it. And as she listened to the alien symphony of the jungle, she began to understand that the most important weapon they had wasn't her rifle. It was Jin's datapad. The third day on Silva found them descending into a deep ravine. The air grew cooler and damper. Thick, gray moss hung from the trees like wet curtains, and a shallow river of murky water flowed along the bottom. The path was narrow, forcing them to walk in a single line. Jean was in the lead now, with Sumin close behind him, her eyes constantly searching the misty gloom, Hannah's scanner was going crazy. The life signs are everywhere, Jean. It's like the walls themselves are alive. Jean nodded, his own datapad in hand. They are. Look closely. He pointed at the ravine wall. What looked like ordinary rock and moss was, on closer inspection, a dense carpet of tiny, interconnected lichens and insects, all moving slowly. This entire chasm is one big organism. We are walking through its throat. The idea made Sumin's skin crawl. She tightened her grip on her rifle. Just keep moving. Let's get to the other side. They were halfway across the ravine when it happened. There was no warning sound. One moment the air was still. The next, thin, green vines shot down from the canopy high above. They moved like whips, thin but strong as steel cable. One wrapped around Day's leg, yanking him off his feet before he could even cry out. Contact! Sumin yelled, her training taking over instantly. She spun and fired a single plasma burst. The bolt of energy sliced through the vine holding Day. It fell away, twitching, and a clear, sap-like liquid sprayed from the cut end. The effect was instant and terrifying. The severed vine did not just fall limp. It thrashed on the ground, letting out a high, piercing shriek that cut through the air. All around them, the other vines froze for a split second. Then, the entire ravine seemed to wake up. The shriek was a signal, an alarm from the walls, more vines uncurled, lashing out not just to grab, but to sting and slash. The ones from above began weaving together, rapidly forming a net, closing off the way they had come. The gray moss on the trees began to retract, revealing sharp, thorn-covered bark beneath. They're trapping us, Hannah shouted, firing her own weapon at a vine snaking toward her ankle. Don't shoot. Jin's voice was loud, cutting through the panic. Stop firing. But it was too late. Sumin saw another vine aiming for Hannah's throat. She fired again, severing it. Another shriek joined the first, creating a horrible chorus. The net of vines above them thickened. The path ahead was now blocked by a wall of thorns that seemed to be growing before their very eyes. The aggressive red fire moss Jean had warned them about began to spread across the ground toward them, its pulsing glow now fast and frantic. This was it. This was the cascade of violence the first team had described. One attack leading to another and another until the whole jungle turned against you. They were being herded, cornered, and systematically dismantled. Sumin felt a cold dread. They were going to die here, just like the others. Jean! Sumin yelled, her voice tight with fear and fury. Do something. Jean stood perfectly still in the middle of the chaos. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep, slow breath. When he opened them, his face was a mask of intense concentration. He slung his rifle onto his back. Then, he did the most insane thing Sumin had ever seen. He walked forward, directly toward the advancing wall of thorns and vines. Hin, no! Hannah screamed. But he didn't stop. He held his hands out, palms open and empty, in a universal sign of peace. He began to hum. It was not a random tune. It was a low, resonant drone, the same frequency he had used days ago with the glow orchid. The sound was steady and calm, a stark contrast to the shrieking vines. The vines nearest to him paused, twitching. They did not retract, but they stopped their advance. He took another step, still humming. Then, he changed his tone, making a series of soft, guttural clicks, similar to the ones he used on the predator but deeper, more rhythmic. It was a conversation. Plea. For a long moment nothing happened. The vines still shrieked. The thorn wall still grew. Sumin was sure it was useless. He was just a man making noises at a storm. Then, a deep, vibrating hum answered from above. It was not Jin's sound. This was older, heavier, coming from the ancient trees at the top of the ravine. A massive shape began to move in the canopy. It was not an animal. It was a plant, a colossal, ancient-looking vine, thick as a person, covered in glowing green nodes of light, uncurled itself and lowered into the ravine. It moved with a slow, powerful grace. The smaller vines went still, as if in respect, The giant vine swayed before Jean, its glowing nodes pulsing with a slow, steady light. Pulse, pulse, pulse. Jean looked up at it, no fear in his eyes. He pulled a small, handheld device from his pocket, a simple light emitter. He pointed it at the giant vine and mimicked its pattern. Flash, flash, flash. He was talking to it, not with words, but with light and sound. The giant vine pulsed again, a different pattern this time. Faster. Pulse, 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 pulse. Jean responded with his light. Flash, 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 flash dash flash. It was a negotiation. The jungle had sent its diplomat. After what felt like an eternity, the giant vine gave one long, slow pulse. Then it began to retract back into the canopy. As it withdrew, the change was immediate. The shrieking from the cut vines stopped. The whip vines slowly, lazily, retracted back up into the trees. The wall of thorns ahead of them seemed to loosen, the branches untwining and pulling back, revealing the path forward. The spreading fire moss slowed its advance, its frantic pulsing returning to a slow, calm beat. Silence returned to the ravine, broken only by the soft trickle of the stream, and no one moved. No one spoke. They just stared at Jean, who stood with his back to them, his shoulders slumping with a sudden exhaustion. He slowly put his light emitter away. Sumin's rifle felt incredibly heavy in her hands. Her heart was pounding, not from the fight, but from the sheer impossibility of what she had just witnessed. He hadn't fought. He hadn't used a single weapon. He had communicated. He had convinced the jungle to stand down. Hannah was the first to break the silence, her voice a whisper. How did you do that? Jean turned to face them. He looked tired, but there was a light in his eyes. It wasn't me. It was the first team. Their failure taught me what not to do. He pointed to the 2 severed vines on the ground. We caused the damage. I just apologized for it. I promised we were not a threat, and that we would leave peacefully. It understood. Day asked, his voice shaky. The sentience, Jean said, looking around the ravine with a new kind of respect. It's not in one animal or one tree. It's in the system, the network, this whole planet. It's aware. It's not evil. It's just territorial. And we were being very rude guests. Sumin finally lowered her rifle, the action feeling like a surrender. But it wasn't a surrender to an enemy. It was an acceptance of a new truth. Everything she believed about survival was wrong for this place. Brute force was a death sentence. Jin's way, the way of listening and respect, was the only way. She walked over to him, her boots crunching on the gravel. She looked at his calm face, then at the now peaceful path ahead. From now on, she said, her voice firm but different, no longer filled with command, but with decision. You lead. Jean gave a simple nod. Okay. They gathered their things and started walking again, following the path the jungle had opened for them. The mood had completely changed. The fear was still there, but it was now mixed with a sense of awe. They weren't fighting the jungle anymore. They were, for the first time, walking with it. And the man leading them was the only one who knew the way. The days that followed were a lesson in a new way of life. Jean was now their undisputed leader. Sumin's commands were replaced by his quiet observations. The jungle was no longer a hostile force to be battled, but a complex society to be understood. Jin's datapad was no longer just a scientific log. It was becoming a guidebook for survival. He spoke into it constantly, his voice calm and steady. Observer's log, day 17, he dictated. He was sitting perfectly still on a large root. A small, furry creature with 8 bright eyes was cautiously climbing onto his knee. It had long, soft gray fur and a bushy tail. I am calling this a symbi squirrel. It seems curious and is attracted to the mineral salts in our sweat. The creature sniffed his gloved hand, then began to gently lick the fabric. In return for a few licks, it will make a specific chittering sound if it senses larger predators nearby. It acts as a living early warning system. The first team probably shot them on sight, seeing them as pests. Hannah watched, fascinated. She had become Jin's most eager student. She held out her own hand, staying very still. Another Simbai squirrel approached her, its nose twitching. After a moment, it gave her finger a quick lick before scurrying away. "It's incredible," Hannah whispered, typing notes into her own datapad. "They're not scared of us anymore." "They were never scared of us," Jean corrected gently. "They were scared of our actions. Now that we are calm, they are calm." Day, using his engineering skills, was also adapting. He watched Jin's interactions closely. He saw how Jean used specific low hums to calm the glow orchids they passed. He saw how the Simbai squirrel's warning chitter had a distinct pattern. "Jean?" Day said one afternoon, holding up a small electronic device he had been building from spare parts. "I have an idea. If the warning chitter is this frequency," he played a soft, rapid clicking sound from the device, "could we make a speaker that plays the all-clear sound? The one the squirrels make when they are grooming?" Jean listened, his head tilted. "That is a very good idea, Day." "Yes. That frequency is non-threatening. It might keep the smaller hunters away." Day worked on the device, and soon they had a small, portable speaker that emitted a continuous, soft, all-clear signal. As they walked, the constant, subtle noise seemed to put the smaller life forms at ease. The skittering in the undergrowth was no longer nervous, but indifferent. Sumin watched all of this unfold. Her soldier's heart was slowly learning a new rhythm. She still carried her rifle, but it felt more like a heavy, useless relic than a tool. Her job was no longer to spot and eliminate threats. Her job was to watch Jean and learn. She saw how he never walked on the soft, phosphorescent fungi, explaining they were a communication network. She saw how he would sometimes leave a small, shiny piece of metal from a broken tool near a large, predator-like nest as a gift. He was not just surviving, he was building a relationship. The most astonishing change came a week later. They were crossing a wide, grassy plain when they encountered a new creature. It was large, the size of a small horse, with 6 sturdy legs and long, shaggy brown fur that helped it blend with the tall grass. It had a gentle face with 4 dark, calm eyes. A small herd of them was grazing peacefully. Jean stopped and observed them for a long time. He noted how they moved, the soft grunts they made, and how they used their strong backs to push aside thick brush. "Pack beasts," he said finally, naming them. "They are herbivores. Very strong, very calm." He didn't try to approach them. Instead, he started spending time near the edge of the herd each day, just sitting and being present. He would mimic their soft grunts. After 3 days, one of the younger pack beasts, curious, wandered over and sniffed his hair. Jean didn't move. He just made the soft grunting sound. The pack beast let out a contented huff. The next day, Jean brought some of the sweet, leafy plants he had seen them eating. He laid them on the ground and stepped back. The young pack beast ate them and then nudged Jean gently with its head. It was an invitation. Slowly, carefully, Jean started to walk with the herd. The young one followed him. Soon, 2 others joined. They seemed to enjoy his company. "They are social creatures," Jean explained to the others that evening. "They see us as part of their group now. A strange, hairless part, but part of it nonetheless." The next morning, when they broke camp, the 3 pack beasts were waiting for them. Jean walked up to the young one and gently placed his pack on its broad, strong back. The creature didn't mind. It stood patiently. Sumin, Hannah, and Day watched in stunned silence. "You can't be serious," Sumin said. "It is willing to help," Jean said simply. "It is stronger than us. Carrying our things is easy for it. In return, we provide company and help find the best plants to eat. It is a partnership." Hesitantly, one by one, they placed their heavy packs on the backs of the other 2 pack beasts. The creatures stood calmly, their large eyes blinking slowly. For the first time since they landed, the humans could walk without being weighed down by their gear. Their progress changed completely. They moved with the herd, following the natural paths the beasts took. The pack beasts knew where the safe water was and which areas to avoid. They were like native guides. Sumin walked beside Jean, her arms free, her rifle slung on her back. She looked at the 2 pack beasts carrying their supplies, and then at Jean, who was walking ahead, the young one nuzzling his hand. "You have not just survived the jungle, Jean," she said, her voice full of a respect she had never felt for anyone before. "You have tamed it." Jean shook his head.
No.
"Not tame. You cannot tame this place. I just made friends with it." He had done what the first expedition, with all its weapons and technology, had thought impossible. He had not conquered the deadly jungle of Silva. He had earned its trust. And in return, the jungle was not just letting them live. It was starting to help them. The signal from the Odyssey was a shock to their system. It was a loud, clear electronic ping that cut through the natural sounds of the jungle, sounding alien and out of place. The retrieval shuttle was on its way. Their mission was over. On the bridge of the Odyssey, the mood was grim. The crew had monitored the team's vital signs, which had remained stable, but they had received no other data. They expected the worst. They were prepared to find a ghost camp, or perhaps a final, desperate distress signal. The shuttle pilot, a man named Gi, guided the ship down through the atmosphere with a heavy heart. He had flown the first team's retrieval mission. He remembered the haunted looks, the empty seats. He expected the same this time. He broke through the final layer of clouds and aimed for the designated landing zone, the same clearing where it had all begun. He expected to see a small, huddled group of survivors, or maybe no one at all. What he saw made him doubt his instruments. There were 4 human figures standing in the clearing. They were not huddled. They stood tall and calm. And they were not alone. Behind them, standing placidly and chewing on some alien foliage, were 2 large, shaggy, 6-legged creatures. They looked like something from a prehistoric Earth, with long fur and gentle, blinking eyes. The creatures had packs and equipment strapped to their backs with cleverly woven vines. Gi landed the shuttle, his hands trembling slightly. The hatch opened with a hiss. He and the 2 medical officers stepped out, their environmental suits feeling bulky and unnecessary in the warm air. They stared. The 4 members of the second expedition looked healthy. They were thinner, and their clothes were worn, but they stood with a quiet confidence. There was no fear in their eyes. The woman with short hair, Commander Sumin, even had a small, 8-eyed furry creature sitting on her shoulder, grooming its whiskers, and the man, Jean, was just standing there, smiling a little. Gi finally found his voice. "Commander Sumin? Jean? Are you all right?" "We are fine," Sumin said, her voice steady and strong. The lead medical officer, a woman named Me, stepped forward. Her scanner pointed at the 2 large creatures. What are those?" "Those are pack beasts," Jean said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "They are friends. They helped carry our things." Jean then walked up to Gi. He did not offer a weapon or a piece of broken equipment. He held out a small, standard-issue data chip. "Here is the preliminary report on planet Silva," Jean said, his tone matter-of-fact. Gi took the chip automatically, his mind struggling to catch up. "A report? The first expedition. They lost 90% of their people. They came back with nothing but nightmares." Jean nodded, a look of understanding on his face. "They did, because they saw a threat to be conquered. Planet Silva is not a monster. It is a living, thinking entity. It does not tolerate invaders, but it will cooperate with respectful guests." He gestured to the pack beasts. "It even offers its help, if you know how to ask." Me lowered her scanner, completely bewildered. You brought back pets?" "Not pets," Hannah spoke up, her voice bright with excitement. "Fellow travelers. We didn't conquer the jungle. We learned to live in it." Jean wrote the guidebook. She pointed to the data chip in Gi's hand. Gi looked down at the chip as if it were the most valuable thing in the universe. In a way, it wasn't a story of survival against impossible odds. It was an instruction manual. Sumin gave a quiet command. "Let's go home." They moved towards the shuttle. Jean clicked his tongue softly. The 2 pack beasts calmly followed him, their large hooves making soft thuds on the ground. The Simbai squirrel on Sumin's shoulder chittered once, then jumped off and vanished into the undergrowth. "It's job done." The shuttle crew watched in stunned silence as the humans and their two alien companions walked up the ramp into the shuttle. The pack beasts ducked their heads to fit through the door and then stood quietly in the cargo area, looking around with mild curiosity. Inside the shuttle, as the engines powered up for takeoff, GI finally plugged the data chip into a console. The file opened. It was not titled Incident Report or Failure Analysis. It was titled A Field Guide to Cooperative Coexistence on Planet Silva. The first line read, Rule 1. You are a guest. Act like one. As the shuttle lifted off, breaking free of Silva's gravity, Gene looked out the window at the shrinking green world below. He didn't see a graveyard. He saw a future partner. He saw a place full of wonder, waiting for those who were willing to listen. The Odyssey and the entire Galactic Alliance had expected a tale of horror. They were prepared for a memorial. Instead, they were getting a diplomat, a scientific revolution, and the first peaceful large-scale alien fauna in history. All because one man had chosen to bring a notebook instead of just a bigger gun.